Morning, crafters. Welcome back to another segment of KISS. Keep it simple, Sylvia. Today's the fourth Friday in January, and we're going to continue with our storage. I have some ink pads that I right now have just been storing them in a box like this, but when I need to get to, and I keep it on my shelf like this. But when I need to get to them, so it's hard to get them out sometimes because these particular ones lock together, and so I have to pull out a whole bunch of them and stuff. And it just served its purpose for a while, but now I'm tired of it, and I want something that's individual so I can get in there and I can get each ink pad when I want. And I also want to be able to store its ReInker. Now, I would preferably like to be able to store it alongside of it, but I don't have a box that's going to let me do that, so I'm going to build it where I have my ink pad and then ReInker and then another ink pad, then the ReInkers, and so like this will hold two ReInkers and it'll go to those pads and stuff like that. So that's how I'm going to build it. So what I've done is when we made our other storage box that we did for our pencils, we used this packing box that I got. So, and remember I said save it? This is what I'm going to use for this one. I'm going to measure the width, the length of the pad, which I think is roughly about, at the longest part, 4 1/4, about 4 1/4. And I don't want this box to be as long as this pad because I want to be able to have a little of it hanging over so I can grab it so it can slip in and out okay. So I'm thinking maybe 3.5 inches. So if I did 3.5 inches, it would allow for about this much to stick out. And I think that's going to be kind of good because I can get in there and I can grab that and I can pull that out without any problem. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut this box down to 3.5 inches, draw my lines on it, and then when I get all my lines drawn on it, I will cut this using my X-Acto knife. And once again, if you're good at cutting immediately with an X-Acto knife, feel free to do that, but like I said many a time, I'm not. I need to have a line. Plus this box, even though it's a good sturdy heavy box, because I've already opened it up, it has a tendency to bend. And if I'm trying to hold the ruler and the X-Acto knife, I just know myself I'm going to get an uneven edge here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to mark this all up and then I'm cut it and then I'll be right back. The box all cut up now by 3.5 inches deep, and now I gotta use my I'm going to use my CoreBoard to make shelves like when we made the Copic marker storage unit. I'm going to use my CoreBoard, and so I know that it's 3.5 inches. So that's what I measured here was 3.5 inches, and I've got that down. So I need to cut that, and then also I need to measure the inside, crossed here, crosswise from here to here, how wide this is. And this looks like it's about 3.25 inches. So once I get these cut down to cut the strip off at 3.5, I'm going to cut a series of shelf units that are going to be 3.25 inches this way. So then I can use them to stick inside here. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'll be right back. Oh, before I go, remember when we did the scoring before on the scoreboard, and I mentioned that you don't have to press hard, you don't have to try and press all the way through. All you have to do is just break the fibers of the paper that's covering the scoreboard, and then it'll just snap on you. So that's what I'm going to do with this after I've run my X-Acto knife down here and broken those fibers. A little review on how to cut this. This is one of the sizes that I've cut out. That's 3.25 this way, 3.5 this way. I'm just putting it back down on my strip that I had cut off. That's 3.5 inches long. And you can either, and I'm just using it as a guide, so I don't have to keep using my ruler to measure 3.25, 3.25, 3.25. All you have to do is just let the first piece that you cut off be your guide. You can put a line down it. You can check your measurements if you want, just to make sure that they haven't gotten big on you, and they're 3 1/4. It's not a problem. And then I'm just using my X-Acto knife. And remember, you don't have to score all the way. And then snap it. And then it's got a crease on the back. You can see that crease right there. And I'm just going to run my X-Acto knife down that crease, scoring it lightly. It doesn't have to go all the way through. You just want to cut some of the fibers and then just snap. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll lay it down here, line it up, and I don't even really have to draw the line. All I have to do is just make sure that my edges meet. Just take my X-Acto knife and just lay it against the edge of this and just cut. Let me snap this one off. And then fold it back and use the crease from the back. Cut this and snap it off. Now I got my shelves. So now my shelves are going to fit in here like this. And I'll put the spacing in that I need. Whoops, that's the wrong way. Okay. And I'll put the spacing in that I need so I can get my ink pad in there the way I want it. So I'm going to put the pads in like that, and then I need to have some space for the ReInkers. So what I'm going to do is I will use the ReInkers as the thing to measure the distance between my shelving, so I can get the ReInkers in there. And you can see that that's a little too wide for my pad, so I need to come up with another item that I can use to measure the distance from my pad. And I just might use that. Let me see how that one works for my pad. Oh, that's pretty good. So whatever you have handy to use as a guide when you're putting your shelves together, use that as a spacer. Of course, the ReInkers will work real good for the spacing that I'm going to need for the shelves for the ReInkers. And then whatever I can come up with for the spacing for my ink pads themselves. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to use my hot glue to glue this all together. Because remember when we did the other unit, I tried all sorts of different glues and they just took too long to set up. And I'm just too impatient. I want it done. So I'm just going to use hot glue. And then I will glue the edges in the back, stick them in, hold it till it gets in place. And I might even do a little scallop on the front here like I did on my Copic markers, so I can, get in and out with no problem. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'll be right back. A couple of the shelves in, and let me show you what I'm using to measure with. I'm actually using the ReInkers themselves to measure for the distance for the actual ReInkers. For the ink pad, rather than use the ink pad itself, because that would just make it too tight, I have this phrase check, and it's just a tad bit wider, thicker than what my ink pad is. So I'm using that to measure for where my ink pad goes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do ink pad, ReInker, ink pad. Now these ReInkers will go with these two ink pads. So then I'm just going to do another shelf for an ink pad. And then do another shelf for ReInkers, another shelf for ink pad, ReInkers, ink pad, ReInkers, ink pad, all the way down like that. That's how I'm going to do the shelves. And then when I'm gluing these together with the hot glue, I make sure that I put glue on just these 3 sides. And then when I stick it in, Remember, stick it in on an angle and then twist it in place. If you tried to put the hot glue down and you went down like this, you'd be smushing. All the hot glue would be coming up, and you'd have a great big huge old lip of hot glue up at the top as you went down the side like that. So once you get the hot glue on, you go like that, and I'll show you. Get the hot glue on this. Put that in, and see how I turned it and twisted it? And then I'm going to put it up against this as my guide. Try to make sure I have this guide in the center. And then just push it down as hard as I can against it to make sure that it's in there level and flat. And then I'll hold everything in place until the hot glue sets up. And just checking my spacing to make sure it's in there correctly. Okay, and just hold everything. And you can see that my ink pads fit in here just great. So now I've got ink pad, ReInkers, ink pad, and then I'll do ReInkers. Put another shelf in there and use the ReInkers as the guide. Get that. And you can be real sloppy with this glue. In fact, it's better. That way you can make sure all your edges are sealed good and everything. Put it in there, twist it, force it down on the ReInkers to hold them in place. Press it down and then press the sides until everything sets up. And then I'll just continue in that manner until it's complete, and I'll be right back. First one done, and I decided I'm going to make another one. So out of the rest of that box, I just cut the box up. Didn't cut all the way through to, because this edge is 3.5 inches. So I just kind of lightly scored it and then folded it back over and then hot glued it in place so I would have a box with the back to it. And then I glued these two sections together with hot glue, and then I lined up for the spacing, and I've got a box. I got a side-by-side box. If I wanted to, I could do another one, or I could do back to back. Or you could make a real big cube and do them, where it's facing out this way. Have them come out this way. All sorts of different ways you can put this together for your ink pads. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to decorate it. I got some designer paper, and I'm going to glue it on and do some painting, and I'll be back and I'll show you when it's all done. I've got it done, and I want to show you how I've got it all assembled. I've got the designer paper on the sides and on the top. I painted it. I did some dry brushing. I painted the insides. You can see how that's painted. And I've got my ink pads in there. I've got my ReInkers with the pads that they go with, and I've got everything sorted by color because I like to arrange things by color. And just to show you how easy it is to pull my ink pads out, pull one out when I need it. I no longer have to pull the whole big stack out, so I can get the one that's in the center. Everything's here at my fingertips. I got my ReInkers that go with the pads that they belong to. And I've got this all done now. Now, when I get more pads and more ReInkers, I can always make another unit and either stick it onto it. So I've got, 3 deep, or I could make a cube out of it, or I could just do another standalone unit. It just all depends on how I want to do it. Now, I don't have to stand it up, but this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to stand it up on I have a shelf that I'm going to stand it up on like this. But if I wanted to, I could lay it like this. Ink pads don't have to lay flat. They are made of a material where the ink is suspended. Tim Holtz explained this. The ink is suspended in the actual pad, so they don't really have to lay flat. But I like to lay them flat. It's just old habits. I mean, you can have them standing up if you wanted to, if you had a unit where you could stand them up and you could actually see what the color is. But so, I mean, I could use my unit like this if I wanted to, not necessarily like this. But I'm going to use it like this because it takes up less real estate on my shelf. So that's why I'm going to do it. So there you go. Cute little handy little unit for my ink pads and the reinkers, keeping them all together. And simple, easy to do. Made a recycled a postal box and using some of our CoreBoard, gluing everything together with the hot glue gun. Well, I hope you enjoyed this segment of Kiss Keep It Simple Sylvia, and I hope that I get to see you back here again next week when we continue with our storage ideas. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.